Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Captain C.A. Richardson here, and today we're talking swim baits. In fact, we're going to talk about the biggest mistake you are making with your swim bait. Why you don't always catch them. And you're like, I use these swim baits a lot. Paddle tails, wedge tails, of course you do. Especially this time of year when most of the fish are set up in 6 feet or less water. Mostly 2 to 4 foot. That's when swim baits are the most effective, and we all know the versatility they give you is amazing the way you can rig them. I'm going to show some of the rigs for FlatsClass University here later, but I want to talk to you about this mistake so that you can catch fish like my wife did right here in this episode of FlatsClass YouTube. So without further ado, let's get to talking about this. Okay, we're talking about the versatility of the paddle tail, the swim bait. Now, you could put a lot of lures in this particular category. You could put the big hard style glide baits. You could put the giant mag draft size swim baits that have become more and more popular with inshore anglers, especially when they're targeting, big snook in inlets and passes, or targeting, let's just say, the Silver King around the bridges. But I'm talking about those of you that are in kayaks and small skiffs and center consoles, and you love catching speckled trout, you love catching redfish. Well, if you like catching those fish, a lot of the zones that you're targeting this time of year are going to be outside barrier islands, and there's going to be certain pieces of cover that make lures a little bit more effective because the fish set up on them. Case or example given would be in many places along the west coast of Florida this time of year. I look for fallen or dead mangroves that are laying in the water, and they've created these little washout bowls behind them, and there's oftentimes those snooks set up inside of them. They're right up against the cover, and they're tough to access. But I can count on them being there, so when I see a shoreline and I see a fallen mangrove, a dead mangrove, it might have cormorants or something on that, I've got a pretty good idea that there's going to be fish somewhere down the shoreline on a piece of structure like that or a piece of cover like that. But the one thing, and a lot of you would look at rock points, a lot of you will look at oyster bars if you're in northeast Florida looking for reds and speckled trout. But the one thing that we don't think about when we're looking at where we're fishing our swim baits, because many of you, admit it, you just spray and pray. You're just throwing it out and reeling it back, throwing it out, reeling it back, throwing it out, reeling it back, throwing it out, reeling it back, over grass, over potholes, whatever. And what I learned with my wife this past weekend on Mother's Day is we were out. We had a low incoming tide. In fact, it was so low, it made it a little sketchy getting to where I wanted to go. But the tide was coming in, and I wanted to check out a point that had been delivering some decent results for clients of mine. So we go to this point, and the water's a little lower than it had been, and the redfish are a little further off the point, but they're on the rock. They're wherever that hard bottom is, that's where they're at. They're not really sitting in the grass, and they're not even sitting in the gullies. They're kind of sitting like right up against the rock. The rock's covered, but they're sitting against the rock. So I'm having her cast, and I do like having her cast swim baits, especially, baits such as this. That's the perfect size paddle tail. It gets eaten a lot. She was getting hung up, always getting hung up, and so consciously she's now reeling faster, and the bait's riding higher in the water column. So let's just say a lot of that rock had about 18 inches to 24 inches up on top of it now, and she's reeling a little high where it's just below the surface. And with all the mullet up there and everything, that bait was getting lost. Didn't seem like it generated a lot of bites. She ended up losing a fish, then she caught one smaller one, which the smaller ones make the mistakes most of the time. And then we moved around, and in about a 20 to 30 minute window, I know from the polling platform that I saw 40, 50 fish there. So there were a lot of fish there. And with the change in weather and what, I just, you rationalize in your head, okay, they're just going to be, this is not their day. They've been pressured, something's happened. So we go around the corner and we're fishing a little further down. She catches this nice speckled trout here. Pretty nice. And that was in a little deeper slough, so we start fishing a few sloughs. We fish some of the points that look like that one on the very outside. And I see a fish here and there, but never really generate anything. Then I go, I'll bet we've had about 6 to 10 inches of water come in since we were out in the front of this barrier island. Let's go back out there and let's try something. I got a feeling what we were doing. So we get out there, and I position the boat so that she could keep the bait coming with the water, with the flow of the tide, so she wasn't reeling against it. And all the mullet were up there, and they were getting tighter to the point now the fish were a little bit more concentrated. I was like, this time when you throw it up there, be fearless. Make it so that the lure will make contact with the bottom and then run. Bottom, then run. Bottom, then run. Not jigging it, okay? Just reel slower. Stop it for a second just before you feel bottom, then speed it up. Then reel slower until you feel bottom again, then speed it up. Then reel slower until you feel bottom again, then speed it up. So it was kind of just doing this, and it was making contact with the bottom. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because we think about those down mangroves. We think about those oyster bars and those rock bars, and we think about all the edges that are along potholes and things like that. But you know what the biggest edge is in the entire area that you're fishing? The sea bottom. The sea bottom is the biggest edge that you have. So what you need to do is you need to make sure you're deflecting these baits off the bottom. Now some of you may say, well, why don't you just rig it weedless? And you can. There's nothing that keeps you from doing it. I do it all the time. Sometimes I have a tungsten weight with an EWG and I run them this way. Tungsten gives me a little bit more feel. If you've been in FlatsClass University on some of our online courses, you know that we use that quite a bit. Sometimes I'm just using a weedless ZWG. A little harder to keep on the bottom. Weight forward is always better because it keeps the head down and digging. And sometimes we experiment not only with the baits that are jig head driven, but sometimes we'll go pre-rigs like this Hercules. That's a really good bait. And then one of my faves has been the Mullotron. The Mullotron's done a really good job for us. But these are the types of baits that, are you going to get hung every once in a while? Heck yeah, you're going to get hung every once in a while. But I'm telling you, until you learn or make a commitment to go out there and make sure that your bait is making contact with the bottom every once in a while, because it's hard to do with a spinning rod. I'm going to tell you, it's a lot easier to do with casting equipment. I know I preach this a lot, but if you're using a 2500 or 3000, you got a lot better opportunity to make this work out. And you're reeling and you're reeling and you're reeling. You don't realize how fast you're reeling, and the next thing you know, you're going over spots that are 2 and 3 feet deep, but your bait's only like 3 to 6 inches underneath the surface the whole time, and those fish are not willing to come up. They're laying tight on the bottom, especially on the brighter days. But if you'll reel it, oh, I'm not feeling bottom, and then let it fall for a second, slow it down until you feel it, and then start speeding it up again so it's always making that contact with the bottom, you're going to catch a lot of fish, even if you're doing it over seagrass. The fact that the bait will make contact with the seagrass and knock that algae and stuff off the seagrass, it will make a fish follow it. It's behaving like a real fish that way, instead of just always a static swim, static swim, static swim. Some days they do want that static swim. I'm not saying they don't. But those days aren't as often as they used to be. And I'm finding that if you can make contact with the bottom, you're going to make contact with a whole lot of game fish. Hope you learned something from this little tip here at FlatsClass YouTube. If you did, go over here and hit that subscribe button for me. Give us the thumbs up and share this. Give me any comments that you might have, or concerns, or experiences that you've had doing these same methods. For me, this is just something I see every day as a 25+ year guide on the water with clients, and they work for me. These techniques work for me day in and day out. I just want to share them with you. Hey, if you're looking for something a little bit more how-to education, come over here to FlatsClass University. You go to FlatsClassUniversity.com, see what we have to offer there. We've got courses on topwater mastery, swimbait mastery, where you learn everything, the underspin game, the weedless game, all of this stuff. Come on over there and let me teach you how to be the best inshore angler you can ever be. Okay, until next time, Captain C.A. Richardson. Well, keep making these videos while you keep those rods spent. That's what I'm going to be doing. Let's go.